The Galactic Confederation had existed for over 10,000 years, incorporating hundreds of species into its carefully structured hierarchy. Every known civilization had followed the same pattern: initial contact, cultural assessment, integration, and finally, acceptance of the Confederation's supreme authority. It was a system that had never failed, until they met humans. Admiral Zextal of the Confederation's First Contact Fleet stood on the bridge of the Eternal Harmony, his crystalline sensory appendages flickering with confusion as he reviewed the latest reports. The humans had done it again. Despite being outnumbered 10-1, a small human research vessel had refused to yield passage to a Confederation mining fleet in the Orion sector. The humans claimed the area was a protected zone due to the presence of an endangered space-dwelling species that no other civilization had even noticed existed. "Most peculiar," Zextal muttered, his translated words echoing across the bridge. "Send another warning to the human vessel. Remind them of our superior numbers and technological advantage." His communications officer, Yinra, a being composed primarily of controlled plasma, pulsed with uncertainty. "Sir, we've sent 17 warnings already. They respond the same way each time. We understand your position, but we cannot and will not comply." The concept baffled Zextal. In all his centuries of service, he had never encountered a species that didn't operate on a clear understanding of power dynamics. When faced with superior force, one yielded. It was simply logical. Yet these humans seemed to operate on an entirely different framework of logic. "Perhaps," suggested his cultural advisor, Connell, a multi-minded collective of fungal intelligence, "we should review their historical records again. There must be some precedent for their behavior." The historical analysis team had been working nonstop since the first encounter with humanity 3 standard months ago. What they found was increasingly disturbing to the Confederation's orderly worldview. Humans had a habit of prevailing in situations where, by all reasonable calculations, they should have failed. "Their mathematical models don't account for human behavior," Connell continued, its spores shifting in agitation. "They appear to have a psychological trait that makes them more determined when faced with overwhelming odds. It defies rational analysis." Zextal's sensory crystals dimmed in thought. The situation was becoming more complex by the moment. Standard protocols dictated that a show of force would resolve such disputes quickly, but something told him this might backfire spectacularly with humans. A new alert flashed across the bridge's holographic displays. The human vessel had launched several small pods toward the space-dwelling creatures they were protecting. Initial scans showed they were setting up some kind of monitoring network. "They're entrenching their position," Zextal realized aloud. "They have no intention of leaving." The bridge crew exchanged worried glances. This was not how first contact situations were supposed to develop. The Confederation's procedural manual was clear: demonstrate overwhelming superiority, receive submission, begin integration. Humans seemed to be writing their own manual. "Sir," Yinra pulsed urgently, "we're receiving a transmission from the human vessel." The holographic display flickered to life, showing the face of the human captain. She was smiling, which the cultural team had noted could mean anything from friendship to impending violence in human expressions. "Admiral Zextal," she began, her translated words clear and calm. "I understand this situation must be frustrating for you. However, we've discovered that these space-dwelling beings are critical to maintaining the quantum stability of this entire sector. We've just completed our initial studies, and we're happy to share our findings with your scientists. Perhaps we could work together to protect these creatures while finding an alternative route for your mining ships." Zextal's crystals flickered rapidly as he processed this. The humans were simultaneously defying and offering cooperation. They were protecting creatures that had existed unnoticed under the Confederation's governance for millennia. And most importantly, they were doing all this without any apparent concern for the massive fleet surrounding their single vessel. "Cultural advisor," Zextal called, "what are the implications if we accept their proposal?" Camel's spores swirled in complex patterns. "Unknown, Admiral. This would be unprecedented. No species has ever successfully negotiated from such a position of numerical disadvantage. It would challenge several fundamental principles of Confederation protocol. The human captain waited patiently on the screen, that same inscrutable smile on her face. Sextol realized he was facing a moment that could define the Confederation's relationship with humanity for centuries to come. What the Admiral didn't know was that this small interaction would later be recognized as the first crack in the Confederation's rigid worldview, the moment they began to realize that humanity operated on principles that would revolutionize galactic society. The Confederation High Council chamber hadn't seen such chaos in over 3 centuries. The massive crystalline dome, designed to amplify and harmonize the thoughts of hundreds of species representatives, now resonated with discord. At the center of the chamber, Supreme Coordinator Valfux, whose gaseous form roiled with agitation, attempted to maintain order. The humans have expanded into 17 new sectors in the past standard year, announced Research Director Mylock, her bioluminescent tentacles flashing with concern. They're not just refusing to yield, they're actively seeking out troubled regions and establishing presence there. The data streams floating above the council floor told a story that defied all Confederation models. Human ships were appearing at conflict points across known space, but not to conquer or control. Instead, they were mediating disputes, protecting endangered species, and establishing trading relationships with previously isolated civilizations. This undermines the very foundation of our order, rumbled General Kexthor, his crystalline body vibrating with barely contained fury. They operate with complete disregard for hierarchical authority. Worse, they're encouraging other species to do the same. The evidence was undeniable. 3 formerly compliant species had already begun emulating human diplomatic approaches, negotiating directly with each other instead of deferring to Confederation protocols. The carefully maintained power structure that had preserved peace for millennia was showing its first signs of strain. Perhaps most disturbing, continued Mylock, is their response to our recent show of force in the Carina sector. The holographic display shifted to show footage of the incident. The Confederation had deployed its 3rd fleet, 5,000 ships strong, to prevent human expansion into a disputed region. The humans had responded by sending a single diplomatic vessel, not to surrender, but to propose a joint research initiative. They're either insane or operating on a level of strategic thinking we don't comprehend, mused Connell, who had been promoted to chief cultural analyst after the first contact incident. Their historical records show countless examples of smaller human forces prevailing against overwhelming odds. They call it asymmetrical warfare, but it's more than that. They fundamentally don't accept the concept of impossible situations. The chamber erupted in overlapping discussions, each species trying to process this information through their own cultural framework. The hive mind collective of the Zexthar proposed complete isolation from human influence. The Silicon consciousness advocated for aggressive containment. The quantum harmonists suggested studying humans might reveal new universal principles. Supreme Coordinator Valfux's form condensed into a tight, focused cloud, a sign of decisive action. We cannot allow this continuation. The humans must be shown their place in the galactic order. Prepare the combined fleets for immediate deployment. In the observation gallery, Ambassador Linera, one of the few who had spent significant time studying human culture, felt her photonic matrix pulse with concern. Supreme Coordinator, if I may, our analysis suggests direct confrontation may not yield the desired. The time for analysis is over, interrupted General Kexthor. We will demonstrate our supremacy in terms no species can ignore. Prepare the quantum fold drives. We will arrive simultaneously at every major human settlement. They will have no choice but to acknowledge our authority. As the council chamber emptied and the massive fleet preparation began, Ambassador Linera transmitted an encrypted message to her research team. Begin Protocol Omega. Document everything. The Confederation is about to learn why humans have a saying. Necessity is the mother of invention. Within hours, the largest fleet ever assembled in Confederation history began moving into position. Over 50,000 ships, representing the combined might of hundreds of species, prepared to teach humanity its place in the galactic hierarchy. The Confederation's most advanced AIs calculated a 99.98% probability of immediate human submission when faced with such overwhelming force. However, in a small office in the Human Diplomatic Corps, Dr. Sarah Chen read the Confederation's movement reports and smiled. She opened a comm channel to the United Earth Defense Force. "They're finally making their move," she said. "Implement Operation Phoenix. And send my thanks to Ambassador Linera for the heads-up." The Confederation was about to learn that humanity didn't just refuse to surrender. They thrived on challenges that seemed impossible. As their ships moved into position, no one in the Confederation's leadership noticed that human vessels had been subtly repositioning for months, or that human scientists had been studying Confederation technology with remarkable intensity. The breaking point had arrived, but not in the way the Confederation expected. They thought they were about to witness the submission of humanity. Instead, they were about to discover why humans had survived countless extinction-level events on their home world, why they had turned so many potential disasters into opportunities for advancement, and why assuming they would follow conventional logic was the greatest mistake any civilization could make. The Confederation's archive of xenological studies was considered the most comprehensive database of intelligent life in the known galaxy. Located in a quantum-sealed facility on the ancient world of Centaurus Prime, it contained detailed analyses of every encountered species' psychology, biology, and social structures. Yet for the first time in its 50,000-year history, its most brilliant minds were thoroughly confused. Dr. Ixinta, the facility's lead researcher, hovered before a massive holographic display showing human historical events. Her crystalline form sparkled with intense neural activity as she reviewed the data for the 1,000th time. "It simply doesn't make sense," she communicated to her research team. "Look at this pattern. Earth's World War II. A small island nation loses 2 major cities to unprecedented destructive power. Logic dictates immediate surrender. Instead, their military had to be ordered to stand down by their leadership. Their soldiers were preparing to fight with primitive weapons against an enemy with atomic capabilities." Her assistant, a quantum intelligence named ARIS-7, processed the information. Similar behavioral patterns appear throughout their history: the Battle of Thermopylae, the Siege of Masada, the Alamo. Humans repeatedly choose resistance over survival when facing superior forces. The research facility had been operating at maximum capacity since the Confederation fleet began its deployment. Teams of xenopsychologists, military strategists, and cultural analysts worked around the clock, trying to understand what they were truly facing. "Their literature is even more revealing," noted Professor Zix, a hive mind specialist in cultural studies. "Humans create entertainment about resistance against overwhelming odds. They celebrate historical defeats as much as victories, sometimes more. The concept of a heroic last stand appears across all their cultures." The holographic display shifted to show live feeds from the ongoing conflict. The Confederation's massive fleet had arrived at human settlements expecting immediate capitulation. Instead, they found empty space. The humans had evacuated their civilians, but left their military installations fully staffed. Each human defender had volunteered to stay behind. "New data incoming," announced ARIS-7. "The human response to our ultimatum has been translated." The assembled researchers watched as the message played. To the Confederation High Command: "We understand that you expect us to surrender. We understand that you have superior numbers, superior technology, and superior firepower. We understand that resistance appears illogical. However, you should understand this. Humanity has faced extinction-level events multiple times on our homeworld. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own nuclear weapons. We've turned our deadliest challenges into our greatest advancements. We don't know how to surrender. We only know how to adapt, overcome, and move forward. This isn't a choice for us. It's who we are. The message was signed by Admiral Sarah Chen, the same scientist who had been studying Confederation technology for months. There's something else, Dr. Ixenta noted, her crystalline form pulsing with realization. Look at their scientific advancement curve. Every major leap in human technology coincides with a period of extreme pressure or conflict. They don't just survive challenges. They use them as catalysts for evolution. The facility's quantum computers were processing historical data at unprecedented rates, revealing patterns that had been overlooked. Humans didn't operate on the standard model of risk assessment. Where other species saw insurmountable odds, humans saw opportunities to innovate. New tactical analysis. HFY 7 announced suddenly. Human vessels are displaying previously unobserved capabilities. They appear to have modified their shields to operate on rotating frequencies, adapting to our weapon systems in real time. Professor Zix's Hivemind buzzed with excitement. They didn't just study our technology, they improved it. In months, they'd done what took the Confederation centuries. The implications were staggering. The Confederation had assumed their overwhelming force would lead to submission, but they had inadvertently created exactly the kind of situation where humans excelled. A challenge that required innovation, adaptation, and absolute determination. We need to update our strategic models, Dr. Ixenta declared. All our previous assumptions about technological superiority and force calculations are invalid. Humans don't follow the rational path of submission when faced with superior force. They follow the path of transformation. As if to emphasize her point, new alerts began flooding the facility's information networks. Human ships were using previously unknown technologies, seemingly adapting their strategies in real time. They had turned their supposedly inferior positions into defensive strongholds, using the very space phenomena the Confederation had dismissed as navigational hazards. They're not fighting the way we expected, HFY 7 observed. They're not fighting like a species facing extinction. They're fighting like a species on the verge of their next evolutionary leap. In the depths of the archive, the most sophisticated predictive algorithms in the galaxy were being rewritten. The nature of humanity wasn't just about their refusal to surrender, it was about their ability to turn existential threats into opportunities for growth. The Confederation had intended to force humanity to adapt to their order. Instead, they were about to witness humanity's greatest talent, making the impossible possible. General Kexthor's crystalline form vibrated with barely contained rage as he watched his carefully orchestrated battle plan unravel. The massive holographic display in the Confederation flagship's command center showed thousands of ships in disarray, their formation broken by tactics that defied conventional military doctrine. Impossible, he rumbled, watching as another squadron of his ships was forced to retreat from what should have been an easily secured sector. They're using our own quantum wake signatures against us. But how? Admiral Sarah Chen's innovations had transformed the human fleet into something the Confederation had never encountered. Human ships darted between the massive Confederation vessels, using the enemy's own quantum drives to create temporary wormholes. What should have been a straightforward display of overwhelming force had turned into a chaos of strategic improvisation. "Sir," reported his tactical officer, a being of pure energy contained in a crystalline matrix, "the humans are deploying some kind of new technology. They're using our communications networks to coordinate their attacks." The human ships had somehow tapped into the quantum-entangled communication systems that the Confederation had believed unbreakable. But instead of simply eavesdropping, they were flooding the networks with false data, creating confusion among the rigidly organized Confederation fleet. In her command center aboard the UES Phoenix, Admiral Chen watched the battle unfold with intense focus. The massive view screen showed real-time updates from across the battlefield, where human ingenuity was proving more than a match for Confederation numbers. "Status report on Operation Babel," she commanded. Her AI tactical officer, an advanced system that had been specifically designed for this conflict, responded instantly. The quantum communication interference is exceeding expectations. Confederation fleet coordination has dropped by 67%. Their rigid command structure is becoming their greatest weakness. Chen nodded, a slight smile playing across her face. The Confederation's greatest strength, its perfect coordination and unified command structure, had been turned into a vulnerability. By introducing chaos into their quantum communications, the human fleet had forced each Confederation ship to operate independently, something they were never designed to do. Launch Phase 2, Chen ordered. Let's show them what humanity does best. Across the battlefield, human ships began deploying what appeared to be simple probes. The Confederation's sensors dismissed them as primitive technology, not worth targeting. That was their second major mistake. Sir, the tactical officer's energy form flickered with alarm. Those devices, they're creating localized quantum field disruptions. Our advanced weapons systems are. They're reverting to basic functionality. General Kexthor watched in horror as his fleet's technological advantage began to evaporate. The quantum-based weapons that had made the Confederation unstoppable for millennia were being reduced to their most basic functions. The human fleet, however, had been designed to operate under exactly these conditions. How? He demanded. How could they have developed countermeasures to technology they'd never seen before 3 months ago? In the archive of Sinological Studies, Dr. Ixento was watching the battle with growing excitement. Don't you see? She transmitted to her colleagues. This is what humans do. They don't just adapt to challenges. They anticipate them. Every solution they've deployed was developed before they even knew they would need it. The battle continued to shift. Human ships, smaller and more maneuverable, executed complex tactical maneuvers that the larger Confederation vessels couldn't match. They fought like they had trained for this specific scenario for years, even though the technology they were facing had been completely unknown to them months ago. New data point, HFY 7 announced in the archive. Humans have a concept they call war games. They constantly simulate possible conflicts, including ones with technologies and enemies they haven't encountered yet. They'd been preparing for this kind of fight since they first looked at the stars. In space, the tide of battle had turned definitively. The Confederation's massive fleet, designed to fight as a single coordinated unit, had been transformed into individual ships, fighting without proper coordination. Their technological superiority had been neutralized, their communications were compromised, and their rigid tactical doctrine was proving useless against human improvisation. Admiral Chen opened a channel to all human ships. Phase 3, she commanded. Show them why humanity never learned to surrender. Across the battlefield, human ships began executing maneuvers that seemed to defy the laws of physics. They had studied the Confederation's quantum drive technology and found ways to use it that its inventors had never imagined. Each human vessel became a point of chaos in the Confederation's carefully ordered universe. They're not just fighting us, General Kexthor realized, his crystalline form dimming with the weight of understanding. They're rewriting the rules of warfare itself. The entire command structure of the Confederation military was based on perfect coordination and technological superiority. Without these advantages, they found themselves facing an enemy that had spent its entire history learning to fight against overwhelming odds and win. As the battle reached its climax, the truth became undeniable. The Confederation's attempt to force humanity to submit had instead revealed why humans had never developed a surrender protocol. They had never needed one. The Great Chamber of the Confederation High Council had never been so quiet. The normally bustling space, designed to accommodate representatives of hundreds of species, was filled with a profound silence as Supreme Coordinator Valthux's gaseous form coalesced at the center of the speaking platform. We were wrong, the Supreme Coordinator began, words that hadn't been uttered in this chamber for millennia. Our attempt to force humanity to conform to our understanding of galactic civilization has led us to a remarkable discovery. We are the ones who need to adapt. The battle that had been meant to subjugate humanity had instead transformed the Confederation itself. The massive holographic displays showed the aftermath. Confederation ships being repaired by human engineers who had already found ways to improve the quantum drive systems they'd only recently discovered. Ambassador Linera, now promoted to Chief of Interspecies Relations, moved her photonic form forward. The humans have proposed a new framework for galactic cooperation. They call it the Adaptive Coalition Initiative. Rather than enforcing uniformity, it emphasizes the unique strengths of each species. The chamber erupted in overlapping discussions as representatives processed this radical departure from 10,000 years of established protocol. Dr. Ixinta, recently arrived from the archive, projected her findings into the shared consciousness space. Humanity's greatest strength isn't their technology or their tactical prowess, she explained. It's their fundamental understanding that diversity, of thought, of approach, of species, creates resilience. They don't seek to dominate. They seek to integrate and improve. On Earth, Admiral Sarah Chen stood before the United Earth Council, presenting her own report. The massive chamber, carved into the bedrock beneath the Himalayas, housed representatives from every human colony and settlement. The Confederation's technology is remarkable, she explained, but their rigid adherence to hierarchy made them vulnerable. By sharing our approach to innovation and adaptation, we can help them evolve while learning from their accumulated knowledge. Back in Confederation space, the changes were already visible. Human engineers worked alongside Confederation technicians, showing them how to think beyond established protocols. The quantum communication network was being rebuilt, incorporating human insights about redundancy and adaptive systems. They don't just solve problems, Professor Zix observed, their hive mind buzzing with excitement. They actively seek them out. Every challenge is an opportunity for growth. It's revolutionizing how we approach everything from technology to governance. The human concept of failure as a learning opportunity was spreading through Confederation society like a benevolent virus. Species that had been bound by rigid protocols for millennia were discovering the freedom to experiment, to question, to innovate. Supreme Coordinator Valthux's form expanded to fill the chamber with a soft, contemplative light. We sought to teach humanity their place in the galactic order. Instead, they have taught us that the very concept of a fixed order is obsolete. The universe is constant change, and now we must learn to change with it. Admiral Chen's voice echoed through the Earth Council chamber, resonating with similar thoughts. The Confederation's greatest gift to us wasn't their technology, it was the challenge they presented. They forced us to exceed our own limitations, to prove that humanity's greatest strength is our ability to turn obstacles into opportunities. In the archive of Sinological Studies, ARIS-7 was processing the vast amounts of new data being generated by this unprecedented cooperation. Human influence is spreading through Confederation society at an exponential rate, the AI reported, but not through conquest or domination, through inspiration. The changes manifested in unexpected ways. Confederation ships began carrying smaller crews, encouraging individual initiative rather than rigid adherence to protocol. Mixed species research teams became common, combining the Confederation's vast knowledge with humanity's innovative spirit. They're not just adapting to us, Dr. Ixinta noted with wonder. They're embracing the very concept of adaptation itself. It's as if humanity's spirit is infectious. In orbit around Earth, a new structure was taking shape, the headquarters of the Adaptive Coalition Initiative. Its design was a physical embodiment of the new philosophy, combining Confederation quantum engineering with human creativity. The building could reconfigure itself in response to the needs of its occupants, a living symbol of the new era of galactic cooperation. Supreme Coordinator Valthux's final words to the Council would be recorded as the beginning of this new age. We sought to teach humanity about order. They taught us about growth. We demanded their surrender. And they showed us why surrender is never the answer. The future belongs not to those who can enforce their will, but to those who can adapt, innovate, and grow. Today, we don't just welcome humanity to the galactic community. We thank them for showing us a better way forward." As the words echoed through the chamber, representatives of hundreds of species began to understand. The day they had tried to force humanity to surrender had become the day the entire galaxy learned to evolve. The age of rigid hierarchy was over. The age of endless possibility had begun.